Sim, agora já está. Em mais uma sessão do Meet the Author. Depois das duas últimas sessões, que foram, como se lembrarão, muitos de vós especiais, com a Elizabeth Strout e principalmente com a Chimamanda, foi mais um convívio quase, do que uma sessão, tanto ela foi obrigada a ficar e a assinar e a conversar e a fazer, mas, dizia eu, depois dessas duas sessões especiais e muito concorridas, temos a alegria de acolher hoje, nesta sessão, a escritora Claire Messud. Estas sessões que temos vindo a organizar são no ano em que a FLAD celebra os seus 40 anos, uma demonstração do compromisso da Fundação com a cultura e também enquanto ponto de encontro entre autores, leitores portugueses e norte-americanos. Claire Messud vai conversar com a jornalista e escritora Isabel Lucas, que nos tem acompanhado em todas as sessões e conduzido as conversas com os escritores convidados. Neste caso, Claire Messud é uma consagrada escritora, mãe de 2, vive em Massachusetts, é professora, além de escritora. O primeiro livro publicado em 1995 e, neste momento, com 10 livros, publicados. O último, Esta Estranha e Acidentada História, o último livro que agora a Azaleia publicou em Portugal. E por isso queria também agradecer à Isabel Lucas, em primeiro lugar, porque tem tido a endurance de connosco viver estas sessões, todas elas, e à Azaleia, que são os parceiros da FLAD nesta iniciativa. Penso que não vale a pena perdermos mais, estamos aqui para ouvir, como sempre, a escritora e a Isabel Lucas, e por isso, mais uma vez, agradecendo a presença de todos. Isabel, the floor is yours. E em inglês, quickly, just to say, Claire Messud, I spoke in Portuguese, but it was just a welcome word. And remembering our last session with Chimamanda, it was a special one. And now we have the honor and the pleasure to have you with us, and it will be, again, a special session. So, without any more words, I give the floor to Isabel to start your talk.
Thank you so much. Obrigada, Nuno. Now in English, boa tarde. In English, no, in Português, boa tarde. In English, good evening or good afternoon. I don't know. It's that period, part of the day. It is a privilege to welcome Claire Messud, one of the most distinctive voices in contemporary fiction. Born in the United States and having lived in Australia, Canada, and Europe, Messud carries into her work the perspective of a writer shaped by multiple places and affiliations. Author of acclaimed novels such as The Emperor's Children and The Woman Upstairs, she has built a body of work attentive to the complexities of human relationships, the fragility of memory, and the contradictions that define our inner lives. Her new novel, This Strange Eventful History, em português, Esta Estranha e Acidentada História, publicada pela ASA, is perhaps, and we'll see, her most ambitious yet, a sweeping multi-generational saga that follows a French-Algerian family through the upheavals of the 20th century. War, the colonization, the displacement that forge and fracture identities. Loosely inspired by the lives of her own grandparents, the novel belongs to the great tradition of the family epic, while also reflecting on what it means to live between worlds, to belong and never fully belong. Across the pages, Messud gives us a mosaic of voices, places, and times, written with elegance and precision, illuminating both the weight of history and the intimate dramas of ordinary lives. It is a book about inheritance, memory, and about the ways our individual destinies are always entangled with collective history. Thank you so much, Claire. It is a pleasure having you here. And I would like to invite you to read a passage of this last novel.
Okay, thank you. I first want to say thank you to you, Isabel, and thank you to Flad, and thank you to all of you for coming. This is my first time in Lisbon, and it's very thrilling to be here. I've wanted to come for many years, and I want to thank Carmen and Susanna for having me here. It's just fabulous. So I will read a little. I cannot read in Portuguese. We were joking beforehand about what it might be like if I tried. So I will spare you. And I'll just read a little bit from the prologue. The prologue the novel has 5 points of view. It travels over 7 decades from 1940 to 2010, and it has 5 different points of view, but only one of them is in the first person, and that's Chloe, who, after the prologue, doesn't sort of reappear until halfway through the book. She's of the youngest generation, and she is the character who's as it were, whose life most closely corresponds to my own, but she is not me. And so this is just a little bit from the prologue. I'm a writer. I tell stories. I want to tell the stories of their lives. It doesn't really matter where I start. We're always in the middle. Wherever we stand, we see only partially. I know also that everything is connected, the constellations of our lives moving together in harmony and disharmony. The past swirls along with and inside the present, and all time exists at once around us. The ebb and flow, the harmonies and dissonance, the music happens, whether or not we describe it. A story is not a line. It is a richer thing, one that circles and eddies, rises and falls, and repeats upon itself. And so this story, the story of my family, has many possible beginnings or none. Mare Nostrum, St. Augustine, Abdelkader, Charles de Gaulle, my grandparents, Larba, my father, my aunt, Zora Drift, my mother, Albert Camus, Toronto, Cambridge, Toulon, Tlemcen, oh, Tlemcen, all and each a part of the vast and intricate web, any version only partial. Or I could begin with my birth or my father's birth or his father's birth or my mother's or grandmother's, or I could begin with the secrets and shame, the ineffable shame that in telling their story I would wish at last to heal. The shame of the family history, of the history into which we were born. How to forget that after attending the birth of his first grandson, my father, elderly then, tripped on the curb and fell in the street, a toppled mountain, and as he lay with the white down of his near bald head in the gutter's muck, he muttered, not, help me, but, I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I could begin, of course, with the aloneness. Or I could begin with the fact that the owner of our local pizzeria and our former next-door neighbor is an Algerian man whose surname is also the name of the provincial Algerian town of his ancestors, the same town in which my Pied Noir grandmother taught at the girls' school in her youth, in the years before she married, years that were, in her case, numerous because she didn't marry until her mid-30s. She might even have taught my neighbor's grandmother or great-grandmother. Or I could begin with the fact that the beloved Lebanese friends of my grandfather's pre-war posting in Beirut include the great-uncle of a dear friend of mine in this American life almost a century later, whose daughter played with our son from the time they were round-limbed toddlers. Or I could begin with the angels on my father's last journey to death, the witnesses to his many lives who appeared, sentinels and guides, along that final path to guide him, the ultimately homeless, to his eternal home. It doesn't so much matter where this story begins as that it begins, And if, as I've come to understand, the story is infinitely expanding rather than a line or thread, then wherever I start is merely that. Not the beginning, but a mere moment, a way of happening, a mouth.
Thank you, Claire. And let's start with that sentence, or that two sentences. I'm a writer. I tell stories. At the first glance, seems very simple. What makes the task of storytelling so difficult or so hard?
Well, I think where should we start? So, I mean, it is on some level simple, you know. But one of the things you realize. Or I have realized over time, is that each time you want to tell a story, it's like a Rubik's Cube. You know, you're trying to figure out the form and the order and the voice, and there are all these things, and what should be in a scene, and what should just be a little summary, what should be told, where you want to draw the reader's attention, in what order, you know, and so the same list of events, right, can make 1,000 different stories. It just depends whose point of view you choose and where you begin and end. And if you start at the end, it's one thing. If you start at the beginning, it's another. So I feel like, I don't know. I don't know. It's exciting. That's the challenge. But sometimes it can be hard.
And the other challenge is where to start.
Yes.
And when and
where and when.
Yes.
And if, like, you know, there's you might sit down and think, I want to tell a story that begins here and ends here, but you can start anywhere in there, or before or after it.
Mm-hmm. Let's go to the genesis, to the start of all of this.
Yes.
It starts with a very concrete heritage, pages handwritten by your grandfather.
Yes, so
that's true.
It's true. That is true. My grandfather. My grandfather, who was born essentially with the 20th century, in his retirement in the 1970s, wrote for my sister and me a sort of family memoir about the years from 1928, when he and my grandmother married, to 1946, just after the end of the war. And I can't say he was a frustrated writer, because he was writing. But he wrote, you know, over 1,000 pages of handwritten documentation, and he included telegrams. He stuck in with sticky tape telegrams and photographs and letters. Somebody asked me earlier, well, why didn't you read it sooner? But of course, when we were kids, all we wanted to do was look at the pictures. I mean, obviously. And then what was one thing another? There were these binders. You know, this text was in these binders over his desk in his study, and I didn't sort of have them. I mean, he died in 1998, but I didn't read the whole thing until 2017. And then I took copious notes, and my husband said, "It's taking you such a long time. Why are you taking so many notes?" And I said, "Because I'm probably not going to read the whole thing again." So it took.
It was well written.
Yes, but you know, it is very well written, and also very clear, like physically very clearly written. So there was never
understood.
Yeah, never a minute where I was like, "What does it say?" And one full of amazing stories, fantastic stories, and just an evocation of their lives in a completely other world. So he was just a little capsule thing. You know, his mother was an elementary school teacher in Blida, which is a town outside of Algiers, and their dad left the family when my grandfather was 8.
That's on the book.
That's in the book, and then he ended up going to study in Paris and joining the Navy and being the naval attaché in Beirut in the 1930s, and Salonika, now Thessaloniki, at the beginning of the war. So they had, I mean, there are anecdotes. Who knew? Apparently not my grandparents, invited to dinner in Beirut in the 30s and got there, and it was a swingers night. What can I say? I feel like it was a livelier time than you might think. So there are lots of fun stories, and some upsetting and troubling stories. But
you are saying, while you when you discovered that, or you read
Yes.
that documents, in 2017.
Yes.
And you start to take notes, and then?
Well, and so I already knew that I wanted to write something, a novel. And initially reading all of these things, I wasn't sure whether I should, how to go about it. And I proposed, it seemed a very wise proposition to my American editor. I said, I'd like to write 4 short novels that you publish separately, and then you publish them all together, and they make something different when they're all done. And she said, after, with not a second's hesitation, she said, absolutely no way, Claire. No, you're not going to do that. She said, you have 1 novel. You get to write 1 novel. So that was when I suddenly realized, or maybe not suddenly, but I realized that I needed to write this sort of larger time span.
Mm-hmm. And how did you navigate the balance between the family story and fiction? Because it must be a hard thing to do.
Well, it's certainly true. I had not written anything that drew on family before, and usually for fiction, I sort of that thing of, oh, there's a story in the newspaper, and then you have a little frame and you can kind of make up something. Mm-hmm. And so here, I had to have access to that in a way also. So part of the what was liberating was reading my grandfather's text and also letters, and they were about people from before I was born. Mm-hmm. So there was the wonderful experience of getting to know them before I was born, but there was also some way in which I didn't fully know them. Mm-hmm. And so I had more room to imagine. And then I think once you start imagining, then it's like a ball rolling downhill. And you're headed off,
Yes, but what first compelled you to write this story? Because we're talking about normal people, not very, they didn't did anything extraordinary.
No
what
kings.
Was so compelling to you?
Well, I think there were several things. So one aspect is that this fact of them having been colonials in Algeria was not something that I fully understood, or maybe even partially understood growing up. I mean, I think what I realize now is that I think my father wanted to spare his children that history. He didn't want us to have to carry. I mean, and if you move to the United States, in some ways you're moving. You're moving to the land that does not look back. You're moving to the land that looks forward to the future. So I think as soon as I, as a young adult, understood that there was this history, I wanted. I mean, it's like anybody. It's when something isn't spoken about, you want to know more about it. So you start sort of digging, and so that there was that aspect of it. And then I think there was also the sense that I had as I sort of stepped back and looked at the arc of my family's travels, that though they were very ordinary people, we were very ordinary people, history had a way of, we kept bumping up against history. There was Woody Allen made a film 30 years ago called Zelig. And in Zelig, Zelig is this like no-count guy who's sort of in the back of the picture at all these major historical events, and I felt like we had sort of that experience, and that also made me realize many people have versions of that experience. That's what the 20th century was, and now it's what the 21st century also is ordinary people unwittingly caught up in the maelstrom of history.
Mm-hmm. You quote Elias Canetti in the book, and I'm going to read in Portuguese, and then there is something like, it's from Notes from Hampstead. A sua vida, na qual nada, absolutamente nada aconteceu. Não embarcou em nenhuma aventura, não participou em nenhuma guerra, nunca esteve na prisão, nunca matou ninguém, não ganhou nem perdeu uma fortuna. Limitou-se a viver neste século. Mas isso, só por si, bastou para conferir dimensão à sua vida, tanto de sentimento como de pensamento. Why did you choose this for the epigraph of the novel?
Because I think it's, for me, it spoke to the way I thought of this book, which is to say that it isn't a story about important politicians or great moments in the history of a nation or of the world. But to quote Penelope, well, actually to quote Novalis in the epigraph of Penelope Fitzgerald's novel *The Blue Flower*, which is about Novalis, and I'm going to mangle the quote, but he says, literature exists to fill the gaps of history. And I feel as though actually the ways that we actually live, we're all living in history. History is happening right now. There are momentous, profound, very serious events happening in this moment. And still we all have to, do our laundry and brush our teeth and pay our rent. And so I think that one of the things that literature manages to do is to capture those slightly surreal layers.
Mm-hmm. But when you start all of this, what was your aim? Because you have the story spans multiple generations, continents, and it has a very classical, I don't know if you agree, language, but the form, it's not so classic. How did you get to the tone and to the form of this novel? That it's, I guess it's not simple. It seems simple, but the structure is very complex.
So I've taught for a long time. I've taught creative writing, and I feel that if somebody said to me, "Okay, I'm going to tell a story. It's going to go over 70 years, and there are going to be 5 points of view."
Yes.
I would just say, really, why? Why would you do that? That seems like such a bad idea. Don't do that. I mean, there was. I never saw the movie, but in the late 20th century, there was a movie when Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise were still married. So that dates us, eh? Long time ago. And they made a movie about Irish immigrants coming to America, and it was called Far and Away. And I saw the trailer for it, and it literally covered 60 years, and it involved gray spray paint, on Nicole Kidman's hair so that she would look old, and grease paint to give her. And you just knew, that's a bad movie. That's a bad movie. So I had to try to figure out a way. So that really was, and what I was thinking eventually is that I don't, I'm not someone who took a lot of science classes, but at some point I must have taken a history of science class, and I learned that when they did the first brain surgery, because of course in brain surgeries the patient must be awake, and when they put an electrode in the brain at the place where memory is, or where specific memories are there entire. So in our memory is the full sense, all 5 senses. And so the patient was saying, I'm in a canoe, I'm on X lake, I'm with my father, a loon is flying overhead, the leaves are turning, I can smell the bonfire on the shore, right? I mean, it's all there. That made me think that I would, like an electrode going down in time, I would write not sort of vast sweeping scenes, but small segments.
Mm-hmm. And the voice, the narrator's voice, you said that the voices that you have here are very close to the characters, I guess. One of the characters speaks with the I. It's Chloe in the beginning and in the end of the book. How did you get to this intimacy and also this kind of flash forward to the big portraits of history?
Well, I think sometimes people have said, "Why didn't you write a memoir?" One, I'm not interested in me, and there'd be an I, more I. Wasn't interesting. The characters.
So you limited the I to the beginning and the end, and it's a
well, there's a bit in the middle.
It's a game with the I. Yes.
But what I was interested in was the interiority of the characters. What I wanted to try to understand and imagine was what was it like to have this set of experiences, this set of beliefs, to have, very far, some of them very far from my own. So the generation of Gaston and Lucienne, who are the grandparent characters, I mean, they are there's a mention in the book of this sort of these beliefs that he carries, where he says our family, we are Mediterranean, we are Latin, we are Catholic, we are French, and in that order, like a taxonomy. That's what we are. And so, and I am a Protestant, lapsed Protestant North American Anglophone, and I wanted to try to step into the mind, try to see if I could really imagine what it was like to see the world from those shoes. And so in that sense, it was fiction. It was always going to be fiction. So, and it was always going to be intimate in some way. It's always imagining the inside.
In the beginning, in the text that I read first, I said something like, this is your most ambitious novel. That's true?
Yes.
And
yes.
Why?
Oh, I think all sorts of, there's the 70-year thing, there's I had a novel with multiple characters' points of view, but I don't know if this is more.
Emperor's Children?
Yeah, maybe this, I don't know if this is more, anyway. But I think, structurally it's ambitious in all, in a bunch of ways that are new for me. But also this, just there are these different countries, there are these different moments in history. I had to read a lot of books. And then
Such as history books? Or?
Some history books, yes. I read some literature, but I read history books and memoirs. On YouTube, there are extraordinary things on YouTube, right? I watched a video of a filmed, I don't know if it was for a newsreel, but of a truck driver, following a truck driver going down to, I guess, take supplies through the Sahara. You could research for years.
Endless.
Endless. So at some point you have to stop. But,
yes.
But super interesting, yeah.
And this you mentioned in the prologue, and here you said that also, that this is a version. That idea that you are not telling the complete or definitive story of your family, it was in your head since the beginning. This is a version.
Well, I think you come to realize that everything's a version.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's all. That's the best we could do.
Being that having that conscious of this only is a version.
Yes, and I actually feel as though it's a thing I get hung up about. I feel as though people who think they have the only version have a problem, right?
They are here. Around.
Right? I mean, there are many versions of everything.
And one of the things that critics say is that this kind of novel came from a European tradition of familiar sagas. Do you agree with this idea? What are the sagas that
I don't know. I think
the Buddenbrook?
Yes, Buddenbrooks is the book that was evoked a number of times. I love Buddenbrooks, and I certainly.
Did you thought about that?
Did I think about it when I was working on
Yes.
this book? I mean, I was aware that it was a family saga over generations that I had enjoyed, but I didn't reread it, so I wasn't sort of taking notes from it. But I think there are a whole host of less well-known sort of family saga sorts of books, or multiple generations. That's certainly one that comes to mind. But I mean, the Russians also. I mean, Tolstoy. They're sort of. They may not go as many generations down, but I mean, Anna Karenina is a sort of a family saga of a kind.
Do you like that expression, considered to this novel, family saga?
It's a weird word to me. Is it Nordic? Is that a
Yes.
Nordic word?
Saga.
Saga? I
I
think.
guess so. Maybe there is something.
Maybe.
Someone that.
I sort of don't know what I don't really know what it means, but.
But you like that applied to your novel?
Eh.
It's a family saga. Okay.
I mean, I feel like, it's a word people use. I don't object to it. But again, I feel like I never looked it up in the dictionary. So if it turned out to have to do with, Vikings slaughtering people, I might say, wait a minute, I don't know if it's that. But maybe that's not where it comes from at all. But I think it's Nordic.
Maybe. It's European.
Yes.
Yes. There are subjects here that are very, I don't know, urgent nowadays. I don't know if they were so urgent when you start to write this novel, but we are talking about displacement and belonging. This resonates very actual here in the book. I don't know if you reread your works, but when do you think about these subjects and considering this novel, what do you think that are so actual here when you read this?
Well, I suppose one of the things I was aware of when writing it is the forgetfulness of how quickly we forget things. I had the very good fortune to have some graduate students at various moments help me with research on this book. And one of them said, "Oh, it's so interesting to research the 1960s because I'm 26. This is like 6 years ago. 26, and really my generation, we think of anything that happened before 2000 as having happened to a different species. It's not. We just don't think it really has anything to do with us. And as the parent, I have kids who are now in their early 20s, and if actually, it's important for people to know that the 20th century was a century of displacement and dislocation and global movement and refugees, exactly as this century is. And that actually, probably if we go back into the 19th century, we would find it's also true there. But it's certainly, by the time, in some ways, there are lots of things to say about that, but also that the legacy of colonialism is that, right?
It's one of the themes that are discussed, very, very present here, and the way that when the grandfather he doesn't feel very guilty about what happened in Algeria, and his sons and grandsons they have different positions in that. How did you deal with this kind of flow?
Well, as I say, that's part of what I was trying to, I spent a lifetime having very strong opinions about some, about these issues. I still do have strong opinions about them. But I could also recognize that, say, my grandfather was not a bad man, right? Yeah. He was not an evil person. And so for me to try to understand, well, what is the starting point? And I think, it's so far, I mentioned earlier that sort of list of things. He came from this single parent family, essentially. France was like a parent to him. He adored and revered France. He was very profoundly Catholic. In that worldview, you think, look what France is giving me, an education and a life. How fantastic that France is coming and giving all of these people who otherwise wouldn't have it, the beautiful Catholic religion, right? It seems impossible now but I think people really did think that way. And a lot of, is that me? A lot of what was dark in the colonial history, I think was not, it wasn't taught, it wasn't commonly known. So I wanted to try to capture, as part of the novel, the evolution that then, by the time the generation that is mine or is Chloe's, there's a very clear understanding of the horrors. Or maybe not clear enough, but certainly an understanding of the horrors of colonialism. And in between, there's the generation of Francois and Denise, who can't have the ideas and illusions that their parents have in a post-war world that is firmly working towards the autonomy of individuals and nations, right? So is trying to and in the novel, Denise spends her life with looking backward, and Francois looks forward, but also at the cost of not ever sharing anything about his life. So I think that for me, part of the novels, what I wanted to try to do was to convey that movement through time, and how differently, talking about the different versions, how you can have the same set of events and people will see them, understand them very differently.
And the Catholicism of the
Yes.
the grandfather, it's crucial here in the book, I guess. The book would be, and the story would be very different if they weren't Catholics.
Yes, it certainly, if they were not, so if faith were not the primary ordering principle of their lives.
And it was.
In
Faith.
real life, or
Yes.
in real life, absolutely. And you know, I have in the document from my grandfather, I have a telegram he sent from Casablanca to Algiers to my grandmother saying, "Arrived safely, stop. All is well, stop. We must thank him and praise him and pray that he will bring us back together." And I'm thinking, like, every letter costs money. Every letter costs money. You could have stopped it, safely arrived, all okay, like done. But that's yeah.
That take me to another question that is where there are silences or gaps in the family history that you felt fiction could feel better than fact?
Fiction feeling better than fact? Well, I feel as though I took liberties in the fiction to make meaning where there, or to try to indicate meaning where there maybe was none in real life. I think there is some way in which fiction can give an opening to slightly altered, to radically altered certainly, but even to slightly altered realities in which there's at least more sense of possibility, maybe. But I don't know that I don't know that I made things cheerier than they were, or than I think they were. I mean, I wasn't there, so I'm making it up anyway.
You wrote an essay. I don't know if it's an essay, but I read it as an essay in Guardian, where you describe the process of writing about family. It's Tolstoy wrote about family. The family are great writers, but it's a great subject, I guess. But you feel that you have something to say about that. What did you find in the process of writing this book that is so special to have something to say about this subject of writing about families?
Is this a question to which you have an answer from the article that I've now forgotten
No.
what I wrote? I feel like, because I don't know what to say. I mean, I think I guess I don't know. How do you mean? What? I mean, because what I would say about writing is that our writing.
Family is a great subject.
Family is a great subject because we have strong. Okay, there's various versions. One is like, write what feels urgent and emotionally important to you, and family, often you do feel that. And then I think there's also the reason why there's the truism, that the cliche about write what you know is, and I say this as a teacher to students, I'm like, well, if you write about your family, you have 1,000 stories and 1,000 details. And if you write about a completely made up person in a country you've never been to, you have like 10 details. How do you know if they're good ones? They're the 10 you happen to have. So if you have 1,000 details, you can choose the 10 best ones. But I think in writing about family, actually then, for me at least as a writer, then the challenge, one of the reasons I couldn't have done this before, is I have not only strong emotions, but a lot of baggage in life. And that doesn't make for interesting or good fiction, right? So what I wanted was to, sort of what I was saying earlier, to kind of step into their perspectives and try, almost as a gesture of love, if you will, like to be it may sound crazy, but like to be as this myself is not interesting. To be as selfless as possible in the writing of the book, right? To actually be stepping outside myself.
Starting to that issue about your family. Your family speaks 3 languages, 2 different languages: French, Arabic, and English.
They didn't speak so much Arabic.
No.
No.
But in the book,
A little
we
bit.
felt something
Yes,
like
a little
they
bit.
moved in that world, the
Yes.
Arabic world, and the Arabic is there. It was you write in English. You speak
do.
French. At what point those French, the language French, have something is here in the book, even when you don't notice that, because it was. I don't know how to put this question, but it's something that has to be written in many languages. I don't know.
I mean, language
Babel.
is yes, it's such an it's such a defining thing, but one that we don't think about, or we only think about it when we don't speak a language well, right? Because when you can't find the words that you want, but actually the grammar of a language structures the way that you think, right? So I mean, I was thinking about in terms of German. In German, where the verb is coming at the end of the sentence, you have to know where you're going before you start. Whereas when you speak English, you can just muddle along and add some clauses and just kind of bumble in a much more, and the flexibility of English, which is this mongrel language that steals words from other languages, that turns nouns into adjectives, and verbs into nouns and whatever. And yet, there's no. There's the underlying thing of how people think and how people experience things that is filtered through whatever language is most natural to them, and that's weird in this book because these characters are, many of them, Francophone, and I'm writing them in English. And
you're putting in the English words in
I'm putting English
in their
yes.
mouths.
And I can't tell you why it didn't feel strange, but I can say that in my life, although my French is imperfect, it's good enough that that when I remember things, I don't always know, did we have that conversation in French or in English? So I feel that while it's almost like if we'd had a circuitry, while my conscious brain has these 2 separate things, there's some place in my subconscious where they're fused. And I'm talking what seems like complete nonsense, but I actually, it does in some way articulate my experience, so that when I am actually writing, which I think involves a good bit of your subconscious, I'm not usually asking that question. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel like I'm translating something.
Mm-hmm. You teach literature, writing?
I teach writing mostly, some literature, but
yes.
primarily.
In Harvard, still?
Yes, I recently quit my job, so.
But we're talking about literature and how to write and how to find the good way to tell a story. What are the main advices that you give to your students when they tell you that they want to be writers?
Oh, I tell them they must read. That's where we start.
And you gave them a list of readings?
No. I feel no. I feel as though that they get to choose. But we do in class read, and we read always alongside writing and talking about student work. We always read published work, but in some way, I do think, again, sort of the one's fantastical cosmology. I have some idea that we're all in this river, and you get to choose what part of the river you want to swim in. You get to choose if you want to read, all and only medieval literature, great, you know. Or if you want to read all and only, I feel I have a sort of for people who want to specifically write, I am conservative enough that I'm like, don't just read graphic novels. That's not enough words. You need more words. I mean, I love a graphic novel, but I feel like if you want to do graphic novels, it's great. But if you want to write text, you should read text. But I think, yeah, I feel there are so many amazing stories.
Can you tell something? Name it. Something crucial stories that you think that are crucial to be a good writer. I don't know.
Well, I think, but I guess in a way that's what I'm saying, is that I feel like there are stories that were crucial for me. There's work.
Such as?
Well, for me, I feel like the modernists were incredibly important. So
Thomas Mann, Woolf.
Yes, Thomas Mann, Virginia Woolf, Proust, Joyce, also Catherine Mansfield. Sort of. I was reading H.D. I was reading Dorothy Richardson. I wrote a thesis on Dorothy Richardson. She wrote 14 volumes about being a dental assistant in London. She's considered the first stream of consciousness novelist. She is not widely read. But I read her. But I mean, so I feel like there was this sort of, and then for me, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy and Chekhov, super important.
They are here in the book. You dialogue with some of them. Why they are close to you while you are writing?
I don't know why. But they are. I mean, so I feel like those are voices that are always with me, and I'm always a little surprised to remember that they've been dead a really long time. I mean, technically dead. In other ways they're still alive, but they've been technically dead a long time. And then there are many other writers and far more recent writers and writers from different languages and countries. But I think the things that shape you, so the thing about what would I say to a student, I wouldn't be able to say, you've really got to read Thomas Mann, because I don't know that it would be meaningful to them in the same way. But part of what's difficult is you want to give young people a place to start. You want to give them, try this or this or this. Not like you got to read this, but there maybe not, no disrespect, Colleen Hoover, who came up the other day. I think Colleen Hoover is, entertainment, right? I think.
You said entertainment and literature. Usually we make that distinction. Good literature couldn't be entertainment?
Literature can be phenomenally entertaining. I believe in entertaining literature, 100%.
Yeah. You told me yesterday that you are writing about an essay about time. This book told you something about that subject, time, because we are here dealing a lot with time.
So I feel, so here, there's the thing that everything in life in literature is a balance of freedom and constraint, and there's the thing that everything is time management. Everything is time management. And writing a story any story is about that. When I was saying earlier, when you're figuring out the structure and you're figuring out what will you focus on and what will you leave out, and in what order will you put things, and will you take them out of chronological order, and if so, when and how and why, and to what effect. That's all about, that's about time. And as readers, we also are approaching, I think it's a longer conversation than probably we can have right now, but I think we approach as readers with a sort of a priori understanding of time and how it works and what we're doing with it that is changing in this world, right? And so the idea, for example, of to many students right now of spending 5 hours in a row reading a book, that's not really part of their understanding of how you spend time. even though they will spend 7 hours doing a problem set. They'll do you know, the economics homework for 7 hours. But if you ask them to read for that long, that's not a use of time that makes sense to them. And that's for all sorts of reasons. We talk about the shortened attention span of the social media world, but it's also societal expectation, right? Because nobody really wants to be, or sorry, maybe I'm revealing my anti-math bias, but do people really want to be spending 7 hours on the economics problem set? Like, I don't think so. But somebody has told them, a whole set of people have said, that's really important, you need to do that. And concomitantly have said, that's not so important, that's just entertainment, you don't need to do that. And just a little aside, just in terms of the US, in recent years, if you are a foreign student who concentrates in the sciences, you get a 2 or possibly 3-year visa after you graduate. And if you are concentrating in the humanities, you get 1 year. So literally, if you're a foreign student looking at coming to study in the US, you're thinking, well, this is a no-brainer, I will study the sciences. So I feel like you give those messages, we give those messages as a society, as families, as a culture, and then people, time is spent in other ways, right? And just on my little, now that I'm on my little soapbox about it, but I feel like, you know, and people will say, but literature isn't important, the arts aren't important, but we are the bees, we are the pollinators. And people go around saying, bees, it's all right if they all die. It's like, well, find the areas where the bees have died and just doesn't turn out so well. So I feel as though culturally we all have a responsibility to encourage and insist upon the seriousness and the meaningfulness of literature in the arts. Sorry, I digressed a little.
No, it's okay. It's time to open the conversation to the audience, please. If you have something to ask Claire.
I think a microphone is coming.
Saga, and you are right, is originally from Iceland, and it is, story, narrative, chronicle. So, but you are right about being from a northern part of the world. I read your essay on Kant's little Prussian head about your dogs. I had a lot of fun. And the issue is, I wonder if this was intention or not. I had a sort of affable repulsion for those dogs. And so my question is, was this intended? And I imagine it was intended. And the other question is, these dogs, you wrote the essay in 2016, and probably the dogs are gone by now, unfortunately. But the question is, what did these dogs do to your literary production? Did they help it?
So thank you for that question. Yes, yes, they were in many ways repulsive. Yes, but I think that was part of part of what I was trying to write about is what was life itself, right? Which is you get the puppy, and the puppy's so darn cute, and it's all so great, and you don't mind, picking up the messes of the cute puppy, and then the puppy turns into the dog, and then eventually the dog becomes old, and the old dog is not cute. I think at the end of the essay, because there was this whole, at the time of our two dogs who were in different ways very decrepit, there were different camps among our friends, and there were the people who said, you have to have those dogs put to sleep because that's very unappealing. And then there were people who said, it's not for you to, you have to go with the dog to the end of the dog's life. And those are basically different worldviews, And so that's, I hope it was funny, but it was also supposed to just be what life. And I've been saying earlier today to somebody, I feel like we now have two other dogs still in the relatively, 8 and 10, still in the relatively cute phase most of the time. Very badly trained. That would be like they bark, and that would be our fault. But anyway, but you learn so much about behavior, about animal behavior, which weirdly is like human behavior, weirdly close. So I feel like I'm always learning from them about how, I feel like over life I've learned that our motivations are almost always base, right? Like it's mostly like, I'm tired, I'm hungry, you're in my space, I feel like, and that's always true for dogs, but it's weirdly often true for humans too.
Hello.
Hi.
Have you visited Algeria? Then and more recently, do you feel some kind of homish? Do you have a homish feeling in Algeria?
Thank you for that question. Algeria, I did get to go to Algeria. I went to Algeria last year, finally, at last, for a fairly short visit, but I was invited as a guest at a book fair in Algiers. And it was amazing. It was amazing to be there and to meet people and learn a little about the culture today, and to walk around the city. And then I also went to visit Tipasa, which is a Roman ruin on the Mediterranean, about an hour outside Algiers, that Camus writes about. It was a really remarkable experience. Most of my life, it wasn't very easy to go. So for the 90s, they had what they called the Black Decade, where there was an Islamic, basically a civil war, and that was not a time to go. And then I guess I was having children, but they take up years. And by the time I was trying to go again, there was some unrest, and it was not a good time to visit then. It's not that easy to get a visa also. It's not the place you can just sort of pop over for a holiday. And I think now they're starting tourism. So they have been starting some tourism in the desert, and I think there are organized tours that you can take in the Sahara, which sound amazing. But it's an incredibly beautiful city, and super interesting, and has an amazing literary and artistic culture ongoing, that we don't know much about here. Or I don't know about Portugal, but yeah.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I'm curious about the 1,000 pages that your grandfather wrote. In the beginning, you alluded to the fact that I think that he'd written it with an eye towards you and your sister being the audience. Is that correct?
Yes.
What is it? Can you maybe explain a little bit about your relationship with your grandfather? I mean, it really seems extraordinary to me that he would make that kind of, I don't know, go to so much effort to do that. And also, if I could just ask a quick follow-up, I hate when people ask two questions, but I'm doing it. Is that work available? Have you given any consideration to being available to the public? It seems like it would be such a wonderful window into that era.
Yes. So I'll answer that question by saying I keep asking people who are professors of history, of European or North African history at universities in North America. I keep saying, would you be interested in this for your archive? And people keep not responding. So if you know anybody who might be interested to have it in there, I think there's a at Aix-en-Provence maybe, or Marseille. I think in the south of France there's a center for Mediterranean studies that might be interested to have it as in the archive. But I certainly know that my children will not. It's not like they'll be saying, let's find the large shelf space in my in my aspirational 600-foot New York apartment that, you know, they dream of having one day while right now living in something the size of this table. Yeah, they're not going to be taking care of it. So, I hope to find a home for it. In terms of what the heck did he think he was doing? Yeah. So that's when you realize, you know. So I grew up. I wanted to be a writer when I was a kid, and I thought like, oh, I like Athena sprang fully formed from the head of Zeus. Like I just came in the world wanting to be a writer. Only when I grew up did I realize like, no, actually, all these people around me, my mother, my father's father, they wanted to be writers, and they were like, how about I want to be a writer? How about you can be a writer? So I was just really following instructions. And he wanted to be a writer. And he had written a novel and a collection of stories in the 30s that he tried to get published and couldn't get published. But, you know, had kept... And then he turned into... What Saul Bellow novel is it? Is it Herzog, where he writes the letters? Is it... I feel like he turned into that guy. So, like, when he died, there was an incredibly large archive of correspondence of him writing to, like, Dear Valérie Giscard d'Estaing. Dear, I mean, I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh at my grandfather, but like he was completely unabashedly corresponding, and sometimes, like with academics would write back, and then he'd have a sort of correspondence with a professor at a university in Paris for a few years. The letter from Valérie Giscard d'Estaing did have a response from an assistant, and that was just the one exchange. But you know, so I think he loved to write, and I don't think he questioned that it was meaningful to record these things. I think, and in that sense, that was a gift to me, to understand the world that way. Like, I guess in a funny way, I'd say. It was in his time and world an extraordinary thing that he achieved, to come from a background as humble as the one that he did, and to have positions of responsibility, you know, in the sort of office, to be a commander of a ship, you know, ultimately, like that in French society of the time, like it was a big leap. And there's a force of will, right, there. And I've known other people, although I wouldn't have identified it in him when I was growing up. But I think it's a force of will of somebody saying, I don't care what you think. I am important. I don't care. I am important. And I have known people in my own generation who have that force of will, and it is a remarkable thing to have it. And he didn't, by the time he was in his 70s, I don't think he had any idea that he was writing it to be published. But I think he absolutely believed that it was worth recording the lives they had led for us. And the other thing I would say, which I think is also possibly very in keeping with the worldview, sort of very religious, was he would say to us, everybody, each generation must move the family forward, right? So if you're moving the family forward, you need to know where it's come from. I don't know if that answers the question. I guess the truth is I can't really answer the question. I don't know what he was doing, or thought he was doing, but I'm glad, selfishly, I'm glad he did.
Thank you. So I have a contact that you may want. I have a friend who did her PhD on the Pied Noir from Algeria. She did an anthropological study of the Pied Noir. So I'll give you the name afterwards.
Thank you.
Yeah. She could be interested. I have a question. You said something that really struck me. You said, I have a lot of emotions, but also a lot of baggage, and that doesn't make for great writing.
Mm-hmm.
And so I want to ask you how you feel about the genre of memoir, and whether that's something you think is people talking about emotion and baggage in a way that maybe doesn't make great writing? Or what's your stance on that?
I think memoir often makes great writing. I think in any event, whether fiction or nonfiction, there has to be some discipline and mastery of one's emotion rather than simply. But yes, memoir is an extraordinary genre and wonderful, and I love it. But I also don't so much feel compelled to write it myself. So I think I'm a great admirer of many wonderful memoirs, but certainly with this, what I was trying to convey, perhaps clumsily, was that in this case, trying to write a novel about based on family members, they had to stop being family members for me. My mom had to stop being my mom. I had to be seeing a sort of separate, autonomous person without all the filters of, always late to pick me up at school and, never let me get the blue jeans that I wanted. And that's a different book, yeah.
I am curious, as an author, when you finish a book, in my imagination, you have to say sometimes goodbye to your characters. And if that's so, in this book, what was the most difficult character to say goodbye, if there is one? And how do you just close the book and they all vanish, or they stay with you for some time? I don't know, how's the process when you finish the book, when you just close and say, that's the end?
That's such a good question, I think I think the wonderful thing about telling stories is that when you're working on them, you're making them real to you, and hopefully eventually to other people. But you're also fixing them, like a butterfly with a pin in it. And when the butterfly has the pin, it doesn't fly anymore. And so when it's finished, there is something strange that happens, for me at least, which is it is a closing, and then you put it away. And that doesn't mean it's not somehow in your heart, but it's not. It's in a different place. It's in your memory somehow, or it's. I think it's a funny thing that happens, and there is some sort of loss, because when you're working on it, everybody is alive, and then they're not, in the same way.
No more questions? Thank you so much, and thank you so much, Claire.
Isabel, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Quem quiser tinha assinar. Thank you, Claire, to sign books.
Yes.
Over there. Thank you.
Over there? Okay. Thank you, everybody. Take it off. Oh.